Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Feelin Film Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron, and with me here, as always, is my best friend and co-host, Patch. I hope it's Patch. I'm not 100% sure how I can...
Hang on.
Yeah,
Look,
let me see your ears. Okay.
I've got ears. I'm good.
I think you're good. Maybe I need to see the back of your head just to be safe. I don't know.
Well, there's no hair there, but that's not because I'm a simp.
You say.
Yeah.
That's exactly what an AI would say, Patch.
Probably. That's probably true. You're right.
Well, that is the one thing we can assure you, listeners, that this conversation is not brought to you by AI. So, however good or bad it ends up being, it's at least original, and we can be proud of that. Well, this was a film that I think we both had been looking forward to. Usually, science fiction is something that the two of us really enjoy. We like seeing new stories in the sci-fi world, whether it's small scale, kind of more intimate, personal type of science fiction, like an Ex Machina type movie, or whether it's, large, epic, lasers and spaceships type of science fiction, and everything in between. So we like digging into this kind of story, and I'm excited to get a chance to talk about this one. So this is your spoiler warning. We are going to do that, as we always do, and you've been warned. Go see this movie. Also, before we get into this, no matter what you hear us, I guess I shouldn't say no matter what you hear us say, because you've already seen the movie if you're continuing. So if you haven't tuned out yet and you haven't seen this movie, go see this movie on the big screen, because it's worth it. It is a wonderful visual experience and worth spending your dollars on. That's my short take. But for the in-depth stuff. All right, Patrick. Before we get into story, I want to talk about your general experience with this from like an aesthetic standpoint. So let's just put story completely to the side, because I want to talk about it differently and separately. But as I was saying there, like for me, the thing that stood out about this movie the most was the experience. This was made on $80 million. I don't know if you were aware of that. Pretty shocking, I think, when you see this movie and you're like, what? Compared to the $150 and $200 million or, CGI movies that we've seen this summer. And we're like, wow, that looks like crap. And then we get something like this for $80 million. It's pretty insane. I really enjoyed everything about the world that was created here by Gareth Edwards and the cinematographer. Amazing, as always, Greg Fraser. How did you kind of respond to that?
It was stunning. I think that was the word that came to me when I was watching this whole aesthetic develop in these 2 hours. I absolutely loved the world building. I began to just question like different worlds, different races of AI. And I thought the movie did a really great job of setting us up with this idea. What happened? Where are we now? Why did we get here? Very quick, very just simple. And I loved the visual effects. I loved the immenseness of the military force. I love the different types of AI that we get. I love that it's not just one race or one type of AI, that it's generational, as we see in the opening, like, I guess the exposition that shows us how we got there. And that really kept me in the movie the whole time, where I was just loving what I was seeing. I thought that it's a visual, I won't call it a spectacle, because spectacle kind of gives it a little sense of like there's no depth to it. There is. It gave me a feeling of District 9, this idea that you have aliens among us or robots among us, and how does that work? With a little bit more nuance, a little bit more like romance in the sort of theatrical sense, very poetic to an extent. It felt more touching. It felt more just sensitive to what was going on. It didn't feel heavy-handed like a District 9, where you have just lots of grittiness, and it's not supposed to. So it's appropriately toned. To do that with robotic artificial intelligence, I think is a phenomenal feat. And Gareth Edwards and his crew just did a great job with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just sets that whole stage for this world in a really interesting way, because we get, like you said, the multiple versions of AI. That really stuck out to me. Just the cool difference in design. I mean, we kind of alluded to it there in our intro. I've never seen a robot that looked quite like this. There's this humanoid face that they wear that is scanned, so there can be multiple versions of the same looking face, because I guess you like sell it or donate it or something when you die, which is wild. But then they have that hole in the head that like spins, where I guess their electronics and their artificial brains are. But then, like you said, you have normal robotics like we would be accustomed to as well. You have, like, there's that quick shot that is, Real Steel-esque in the early montage. I'm sure that you noticed that, where they're like the two robots that are punching each other that basically look like Chappie. You have that kind of robot. And then you have that really, really interesting one for me was the suicide bot.
Yeah, I was incredibly impressed with the concept behind the suicide bot, because normally I'm thinking like trash can, I'm thinking like really fast, like an R2D2. This thing is running like a human being, and it reminded me of Case from from Interstellar. These robots that articulate with things that are not really arms or legs, but they feel human because of the way that they articulate their parts. This one had arms and legs, and it looked like a trash can that was running. But the way it was running was not robotic. It was very much like Tom Cruise if he were a suicide bot. Like, this is essentially, I'm pretty sure, I'm theorizing that Tom Cruise stepped in, gave his his body there to do motion capture, and now we have that. Yeah,
motion capture. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He's wearing all the dots.
Yeah, exactly. So I was really impressed. I liked even the, I guess you would call it the standard AI that kind of looked a little bit like Johnny Five with the flat head. And I think that what Gareth Edwards did was intentional in that he tried to humanize, but not be very overt about it. So you would see specifically at the end when everything was kind of going down and you had the different pockets of AI villages and the different types of AI, but they'd be covered up with robes. So you can tell without telling a story that each one of these different races, each kind of generational or whatever you want to call them, was adopting some kind of culture around them, which is what AI traditionally does. It listens and looks and learns. And so it was really interesting to see some of these AI robots, some of these creatures who had monk robes on and who would walk around, with their hands clasped. And then you'd see them next to humans who you could definitely differentiate. But I think what Gareth Edwards was going for here, which is that it's not the thing that you're trying to parse out from a person. It's trying to incorporate this idea that the culture can create assimilation and the sense of like a cornucopia of all different types, which is, it's a general message that we get in the movie. It's one that's at times a little heavy-handed, where you have humans and AI can live together. And I'm like, I'm not buying that just yet. So, but I like the concept. And I think it was told pretty well.
What about the American military side? So I thought that looked really cool too. I definitely get the Rogue One vibes, both from a design standpoint and the parts where the movie is more gritty is, when there are like major attacks happening and all of this weaponry is going off and explosions. And I think one thing that Gareth Edwards is just proven now to be really, really special at is getting the scale right for humans versus monsters. And I say monsters, well, he literally made a movie called Monsters, which is outstanding, by the way. If you guys have not seen Monsters, it's like I guess it's an indie film is what you would call it, but like it's pre him doing Godzilla. It's why he got the job to do Godzilla, and I think Monsters is fantastic. But in Monsters and in Godzilla, and then in Rogue One, there is such an understanding of perspective with the humans on the ground and these big machines. And it just, I don't know how to express it well, Patrick, but like in some movies, it feels off and it feels generic and fake. And in these movies, it feels real. They don't feel overly large and comical. They just feel accurately large. And I think James Cameron does a good job with that too. The biggest machines in the American military arsenal reminded me of some of the ones that like tear down the forests in Avatar and Pandora.
Yeah, I mean it's appropriately sized. You're right, and I think Denis Villeneuve does the same thing in Arrival, where he creates the enormity of the alien race as a way to show its power, as a way to show its force. And I thought the design of the Nomad was amazing. I love the fact that this thing can actually like scan entire sections of land. Like, what are you doing? I feel like it's a giant supermarket and it's like, I want this and I want that. I'm going to scan it. Is this on sale? Is New Asia on sale for us to blow up? So when we get introduced to the Nomad and we see its power, I knew at that point, man, you don't mess with this thing. It's going to become a focal point. Like, it's the biggest arm of the U.S. military that becomes the queen on the chessboard. What I didn't like was the fact that this felt a little kind of a retread of like, the Americans are bad and they wanted to, I got Avatar vibes, honestly. Like, you have New Asia, and I don't remember who said it, but someone says in the movie, maybe it's the voiceover, no, I think it's Allison Janney's character. She says New Asia they don't care about anything American. They just want to be left alone. And I'm like, then why don't you just leave them alone?
What?
So
she's definitely got Colonel Quaritch level of like, she's doing it. She's up to 11. Like, she is turned up and she is going for it in that crazy villainish mustache twirling kind of way.
Yeah, I love Allison Janney in almost everything that she's in. She's always going to be my CJ Craig, and I thought she's great in Juno, and just she has a number of just fantastic roles.
Long way from the White House.
Long way from the White House. Definitely still political in some ways, but she came across as Calhoun, Jane Lynch's character from Ralph Breaks the Internet, this sort of feminist kind of thing, but she does it. She's a strong woman. I mean, she carries herself very well in the roles that she plays, but coming across as a military combatant it didn't sell me. She never felt that way. And when I saw how she was setting up Joshua, John David Washington's character, I said, oh man, she's going to become a bad guy. I don't want CJ Craig to become a bad guy. Right. And I think where Gareth Edwards shines in his visual aesthetic, I think he pulls it back significantly in the story. Like, to me, this film really gave us this kind of higher budget TV movie feel that sets the stage for a TV series that's never going to be. I really was thinking about, what was I thinking about? I was thinking about Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined series that you and I fell in love with, and how it's set up with this 2-hour sort of TV movie that then bleeds into a TV series. And that's kind of how I felt when I left. I was like, this was good for something else because you set us up with a lot of different things. And while the story does have a good beginning, middle, and end, I never felt overall like I was in it. Like, I never felt like I was connected to Joshua or to Alfie or to anybody that we're supposed to be connected to, because, and maybe this is, kind of the blessing and the curse of Gareth Edwards' visual style, I was really interested in everything else. I was interested in New Asia. I was interested in, like, tell me about life leading up to the warhead detonating. Like, that whole intro, I was like, wait, can we go back? Because I kind of want to see how we got there. And so there's intrigue there. And I think that's the sci-fi part of the sci-fi story that I latched onto, which is I didn't get enough of that. And so the story that you're telling me is more like, okay, I think I know what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure that girl is his daughter in some weird way. And sure enough, that's what we get. So I don't mind not being surprised, but when you're sort of impressing me with the visual aesthetic that you're giving me, I kind of expected that same on the narrative side.
Okay, so this is exactly what I have felt like as well. For me, it is visually like stupendous and one of the best and most awesome things I've watched in a long time. Just from that perspective, I love the design and the look and the sound. Hans Zimmer score, can never go wrong with that. But I felt the narrative was lacking as well in detail, in depth. I thought the dialogue and the script were at times just downright like bad. Like took me out of some scenes because I was like, come on, man, what are we doing? What are you saying right now? This is not how we talk in a movie that is serious. And so there were some of those kind of problems for me as well. Joshua and Alfie. So we got, this is our second attempt, I will call it, at making John David Washington a blockbuster star. And I have long been in the camp that thinks that he was totally capable of that. I just thought he had the charisma and the acting chops, like his dad, to lead major, high action kind of fare. I don't want to completely say I'm out on him at this point being able to do that, but I struggled to connect with him in that way in this movie. And I think, again, that the script, both here and in Tenet, somewhat, because of the complicatedness of Tenet, like it doesn't necessarily do him any favors, but he just never rises above that material, and I never see him and go action star. The thing that I see in John David Washington that I love and latch onto is in the quieter moments, and is in the dramatics and the facial expressions and his relationship and his ability to emote. I like that stuff about his acting, and I like it when he can be a little bit silly and comedic. I think he's really good at like wittiness, like he is in BlacKkKlansman, and there's none of that in this movie. That's not what this movie is. And so it was like pretty much every father-daughter story that we've gotten, and there seem to be a lot these days. And so it was hard for me not to just compare this to Joel and Ellie and be like, I needed more of, like, I was constantly wondering, where is the sarcasm and where is that kind of little bit of a bite and snarkiness to the script, and it was never there, and I never felt sold on the heavy nature of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I wasn't really thinking Joel and Ellie were wanting that, even though you and I have recently gone through the Last of Us season 1. I think for him, what I wanted was connection with her, connection with Alfie. He names her, and at some point they have that callback line.
Dog, though. I mean, that is a pretty bad. It's like your name is Spot because you got spots on you. So,
yeah, I mean, it's
obvious.
like, right, and I think for him, we established that he's a dad, or a soon-to-be dad. We established that he is in love, and I don't know if it's the length of time that we spend with that it's not long enough, but I don't know that it was established as strongly as I wanted, because immediately we're cut 5 years later, and that's when I think your Joel connection made sense. Like, oh, he lost his daughter, and now, he's living rubbishly in the cleanup at Ground Zero. But it was very simplistic, like the story of him trying to reconnect with his wife. And it was a carrot, which I kind of picked up pretty early on. It was difficult for me to make the connection to her being the creator, to her, because that's the thing. So what hurt me was the movie felt uneven at times. Like, you had the title card, the creator. I'm like, all right, we're in. And then you get to a point where then another title card pops up, and it's the child. And I'm like, are we in an episode of Mandalorian? Yeah, chapters, right?
Care for that structure.
I didn't like that, because now I'm like, okay, what am I looking at? Am I now trying to point out like the mother? Okay, well, I think you've basically spoiled the whole movie with these title cards: the creator, the child, the mother, the annihilation, whatever comes up next
too, by the way, which is weird, but anyway.
Yeah, it's just, it didn't really make sense, because I didn't like I almost felt like we were meant to watch smaller stories inside these chapters. And I had a hard time connecting him with Alfie in terms of I would never believe that she is an emotionally feeling thing. She's not a human being. And again, maybe that's by design, but it wasn't a tension point for me. It really felt like a mistake. It felt like as he is getting to know her, he's protecting her. The moment that he talks to her through the EMT, not EMT, but the electromagnetic EMP, thank you. The static and stuff, when he says, not off, just on standby. I felt like there were too many like things that popped in that tried to pay themselves off in small ways. And it just felt a little cheap. It didn't feel nuanced in the story. Like you have that and it pays itself off. You have a moment where he says, if I could just be with my wife for just one more minute, that would be fantastic. And she just happens to, when they're the Nomad, find a replicant version of, not replicant, sorry, that's a different movie, but a simulant version of his wife, and she starts pulling her out, and he just happens to have the memory card of her memory. It was a little too convenient to tell this story. And I get it. Again, that's kind of the romance behind it. I didn't dislike it in the sense that it wasn't intelligent. It just didn't seem like it fit the same kind of grandiosity that the visual side of it was. So I wanted elevation. I wanted you to not just give me kind of base level symbolism and base level themes. I mean, don't throw things at me in a way that I'm like, yep, I've seen this before. This is totally District 9. This is totally Avatar. It felt like a piecemeal, like we're going to pull this and this and this, and then you attach like really impressive cinematic, and you kind of leave me going, I don't know if I really like that. I kind of don't, but I kind of do. So I can't really know if I can recommend this to people.
Yeah, I struggled the whole time because I felt like it was very much a Star Wars reskin in so many ways. And like you said, it pulls from various things, but knowing that Gareth Edwards has directed Rogue One, and the way that this is in conversation with Rogue One. I mean, it is Rebels, and so there is a Death Star that is hunting down Rebel bases and destroying them. There is a child that is very much Yoda-like in her wisdom, who basically uses the Force. That is what her weapon power is. It's this unseen ability to control things with her mind. And then there is the giant weapon and the Americans bring out when they go after that one base, those gigantic machines that come out of nowhere. They're basically AT-ATs. I mean, that is the scale that we have from them. They're the way that they use their weaponry. And it was just a constant flow of these things that made me think about other movies as well. And like you said, nothing in the narrative, in the script, elevated its specific topic about AI for me to do anything unique about humanity's relationship with AI. One of the things I really had a problem with, to be honest with you, is that narration drop in the very opening that you talked about that is very interesting, and like talking about so we created AI and then they nuked Los Angeles. And so now we're at war and we're trying to eradicate them. As far as I can remember, the only time it's brought up again is Ken Watanabe at one point says something like the humans made a coding error in the AI, and that's why the AI attacked. But that's it. It's like one line drop, Patrick. And my issue was what was interesting to me was not the same old song and dance of a dad and finding a daughter. Like, I mean, I guess I've seen that so many times, but I wanted, okay, that's a hook that's interesting and unique because you have an AI perspective telling me it was a human error. You have a human perspective saying the computer attacked and destroyed millions of people in our city. I want more of that. Like, I want to know more about the war and the battle between the human mindset and the AI mindset. And then there's no resolution to any of this. It's just the over-the-top villain, like, we're going to kill you no matter what because you're a computer, and it's not killing you. It's just turning off an electronic, because that's how Allison Janney puts it over and over. And then you have the AI mindset of like, but no, we never did anything to you intentionally, and we aren't part of that, but now we're being attacked, and we just want to coexist. Like, I don't know. I just didn't feel like we got into it. It was just so much. It was action and then solely focused on him trying to take down Nomad with Alfie, that the bigger world problem. And so what? So you took down Nomad. It took them a decade to build it. Okay. Does that mean they're not going to keep trying to fight you for the next 10 years and just build another Nomad? I guess I didn't understand what the end goal was for the story here.
Yeah, and a couple of things there that you pointed out. One of the things I have an issue with is, yes, there's not any resolution with that aspect of it. And it felt a little bit like when Kim Watanabe's character, Haroon, as you mentioned, one thing interesting he says is, you know what will happen when we win this war? Nothing. He says that. Nothing will happen because they don't care. They don't care about anything but defending their own life as AI. They're not going to go try to take over America. They're not going to try to become like the new United States. They're going to live as they are. Boom. But I don't really know what that... I was left kind of wondering, well, what's the resolution then? So you take down Nomad, and you've got Alfie smiling. Well, the problem is still there. Alfie's going to grow up. Her wheels are going to get bigger, I think, as they say, and she's going to be able to essentially take control. So are we to assume that we're now on her side because pro-AI Americans are bad? Now she has the freedom to grow up as this AI god, and she's now going to essentially take over the world and become like, this is the beginning of a TV show where you have without another side.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I mean, there's not enough there for me to be compelled to say, man, I can't wait to see what will never happen. I mean, I wasn't intrigued enough to say I'm ready for that, but that's where it leaves us. It leaves us with an incomplete thought that's not full of tension appropriately. So there are movies that set up sequels. There are TV shows that set up cliffhangers, and they do so with intent. Like there's tension there, unresolved something. And I don't know if Gareth Edwards, in writing this with Chris Weitz, was thinking, we want to land the plane, we want to destroy this thing, and we want to articulate that Alfie's going to live happily ever after as the queen of the AI. If that's the case, it's not quite a good ending, because I never felt like AI was really the good people. We're really the good people, or humans for that matter.
I was going to ask you who you were rooting for.
I didn't care either way. I mean, again, we were basically told, we're basically told hate the Americans because they just want to kill people who aren't doing anything to them. And we get moments with dogs that are going to get shot. And I'm like, see, this isn't cool. Like you're intentionally setting us up to know who the bad guys are. And the point of AI in movies and the tension that we feel in the real world is, when is it too much? When does AI become the enemy? When do we get to a Skynet where the robots take over and potentially do what you just said, which is want to live in peace, and it's not their fault that this happened? When do we get to that point where there's nuance to all that? This is kind of the problem I have, is I don't like the mustache twirling villain. I don't like the whitewashed good guy. Like, I need blurred lines between
like
humans
Vietnam or war on.
Yeah.
It's a war on terror analog. It's
exactly.
You blew up the towers, and now we're just going to kill everybody who's of any Middle Eastern descent in retaliation.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that because I was basically told at the very beginning who to hate and who to like, going along for the ride wasn't interesting to me because it was spearheaded by Joshua and Alfie, whose relationship wasn't deep enough for me to care. If you had put Joel and Ellie in this situation and fleshed out their relationship over time, over a course of 2 hours or whatever, that would have kept my interest because they were interesting. And I think that's what I was lost with, is I was never really interested in Joshua or Alfie in their relationship with each other, his relationship with his wife. I felt like he was just sort of a mercenary, like he was sort of a pawn in all this. And he just so happened to get on Nomad and do his thing. And so when he puts his hand on the shaft there and he's like, I'll see you. I'm like, okay, yeah, you will. Cause I mean, you've done what you're going to do.
But you won't. Even if you go to heaven or hell, like it's a computer. It's just being turned off. You're not going to
yeah,
get it.
That's exactly
it's ones and zeros. You know, like there's no spiritual way for you to interact. Yeah, it was weird. And I also found it just timely in a funny way because the strike has been ongoing while this movie was released, and of course it has just been ended for the writing side. But one of the biggest things that the writers and the actors are fighting over is whether or not AI can be used to basically replace them or to scan the actors and be used by studios. And Disney was fighting for the right to be able to do that. And here is a movie that is essentially wholly pro AI. Like it's like, hey, they're just like us. They're just everyday people. That's the message that we get from the movie, is that we're the bad guys for wanting to get rid of the computer and that destroyed our thing. And we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to have mistakes like that happen again.
So
that can be controlled. And so I found it was just such a muddy message for me. It as compared to, like, say it was an alien race. Like if it's an actual flesh and blood living race of aliens that you're interacting with or something, it's just different. It's just different. Unless you're a believer that the sentience of AI is equal to a soul. And this movie does nothing to dive into that in a deeper way or a more interesting way than better movies have.
Yeah, the concept of AI and all those things that you mentioned are too nuanced for a 2-hour movie, especially when the bulk of that,
especially an action-heavy one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm notorious for going on with our conversations and say this would make a better TV show than it would, because I like TV shows, and original series is kind of the byproduct of that. But it's true. We think about Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. The only reasons that we kind of appreciate Cylons for having the ability to be somewhat empathetic by the time the series kind of really digs in, one of the reasons is because they have faces. They're humans. They're human looking. If you look at some of the intricate designs of the creator, I gravitate more towards, emotionally, if there's anything, towards those that have actual faces. Like if you give me a robotic face and you destroy it, even if it moves like a human being, like that trash can bomb, I'm not going to feel sad when it explodes. Yeah, that's great. The Tom Cruise trash can bomb. That's what it is.
You want to be honest? I'm going to be honest real quick. Just stand it. I felt more for the robot who very briefly questioned the reality that he was about to run out there and kill himself than I did for any of the humans or AI characters in this movie. But there was like one perfect beat, I thought, in the script where I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, but one of them, there's a moment where one of the two suicide bots kind of reflects and realizes what's about to happen and then goes. Mm-hmm. But I was like, that's interesting.
That's the character of Case. That's, it's those, when they can talk normally, if they don't have faces, and make those questions. I think he says something like, it's been a pleasure to serve. And he runs at full speed. Like it just runs programming. It's Johnny Five, right? But I look at the fact that the only real connection we can have, the only way that I was able to connect to any of these characters is because they had faces. Like if Haroon didn't have a face, even though he has his spinning wheels in his ears, that combined with his voice gives him a sense of humanity. But all these things are so complex. All these ideas about does AI have a soul? If they can think for themselves, does that give them value? I mean, these are all great philosophical questions, and they're worthy of coffee table conversations. They're worthy of Starbucks conversations. But they just don't do enough in the movie to cause me to ask those questions. It's like Gareth Edwards said, I love the concept of AI being against humans. Did you see Terminator 2? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so here's what I'm going to do.
Go kill good.
Yeah. And I think he attempts to try to create a humanized connectivity on an individual level with Joshua and Alfie. And that's where it fails. If there's a way to connect those two emotionally, it allows us as an audience to resonate because we're Joshua, we're human. And we get to ask the question, what would it be like if we saw a child watching TV that was AI? It's interesting. I think it would have been interesting more for me if I hadn't seen that in the trailer, because that's very different in the minds of the movie. Like, all the AI are either robots or adults. That's another concept that was not fleshed out very well, where this child was created, and it seemed like it was the first and only child that has the ability to grow. And I think her tunnels or whatever it is would grow, and her power would grow. And
we don't know. We have no earthly idea anything about the AI, because there's this scene, and this drove me batty. I'm sorry. This drove me so mad, and I couldn't be specific about it. I don't think in my spoiler-free review, so I wanted to tell it out. When Joshua takes her to his friend's house, right? And the guy who is a former special ops coworker, whatever,
who gave him the ring.
He went native, and now he's got like an AI girlfriend, and he is sitting there, and he has this like pokey thing tool, like a pen, and he's poking it inside of the hole, and he goes, and I don't even remember what it was, but he like spouts off this stuff, and he's like, blah, 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 and oh my gosh, and her power is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this. She's going to be able to control the world and destroy and he's like, all he's doing is looking in a hole and just like poking around, and he suddenly knows the intricacies of all of the things that this AI can achieve. And I was like, come on, man. Like, you've got to give me, there's so many interesting ideas. Like, what is that? Why is it designed like that versus just because it looks cool? And what is interesting about like AI Gemma Chan, the creator, like Nimrata, and like an immaculate baby that has been like, it's just kind of like, it's all skirted over. It's like there's an immaculate birth of this baby that has human DNA kind of, or has been coded off of baby DNA or something. And I'm like, let's go. Let's like get it. And then it's, oh no, we got attacked. And we gotta go kill Alice and Janney.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted so much more for it. So it had me interested, and then it failed to like.
It's too much to introduce, to tell a story. And
I think the point there really sums it up well. It needed more time.
Well, and the thing is I'm just now thinking about the third Jurassic World entry, and I think one of the criticisms we had is that as much as we did not like Fallen Kingdom, it sets up at least 3 different plot lines of interesting things, and I think we both said, pick one, and let's run with it. That's cool. Underground dinosaur fights and selling off stuff, or Dinos Among Us, whatever. And what does it do? It introduces us to a 4th unrelated thing with giant bugs that were killing crops. And that's kind of what I felt like in The Creator, is that you have all these cool concepts, all these things that we get introduced to throughout the movie, and yet we're fixated on Joshua and Alfie. And that's what I think has happened here, is Edwards has put all of his eggs in this basket of two people or two characters, and we're meant to sort of pay more attention to him reuniting with his wife and him realizing that Alfie is actually the digital version of his child. And by the end of the movie, it doesn't mean anything, Aaron. It doesn't really mean much. So what has happened is he's just carried her to AI people and he died. And now she's going to do something. And I don't know that his death didn't feel meaningful. His reuniting with his digital wife didn't feel real because it wasn't.
That was that.
And but I tell you, I absolutely loved when he gets to the temple, gets to their version of heaven, Gaga or Gugu, whatever the Japanese, or I don't remember what it was. That sounds really offensive, but it was a word that he couldn't pronounce because Alfie was trying to give it, and it comes to find out it's heaven. So he's going to heaven. Again, more of this on the nose symbolism, but he gets there, and I love the moment that he has with her, with his wife that was saved. And he kisses her and he unplugs her essentially. And he has that moment. And to me, that felt the most genuine because he had achieved what he wanted to. And if he hadn't reunited with the digital or the AI version of her, that moment would have been really powerful, but it sort of got diminished because if you're going to give her to me, if you're going to kind of create a digital version, instead of just giving me 3 seconds with a mannequin, an AI mannequin of your wife, save her, all of us, let's all be together. I would have been more satisfied, honestly, because of the way this movie was playing out. I would have been more satisfied if he and his AI wife had escaped and all three of them would have built this brand new kind of world of super daughter and her kind of mixed family here, this blended family of real and not. To me, that would have landed the plane of AI can live in harmony with humans, even though, we didn't think that way at first. And John David Washington's character is, what I can tell, he's a guy whose character needed to have his mind and heart changed. And so by giving us the AI version of his wife, he accepted that. It wasn't just programming for him. So I would have liked that. I would have liked to tie the bow up really nice, give us a nice bow and let them all survive. Instead, they're gone and she's now living among her people or among her AI folks with really no purpose apart from just being able to control everything.
Yeah. I mean, the only answer is we've got a bigger weapon than you now, so you'll leave us alone. Like that's where it leaves it off. And I'm like, that's not satisfying. That didn't change the world at all. Nobody's actual heart or mind has been altered in the slightest. Right. The only guy that had a change of heart died because he sacrificed himself. So what did we do here? Like what is nothing, like really nothing changes other than maybe the US doesn't come after them quite as much because they don't have the biggest toy. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, there was a lot left to be desired. And so I guess what you're saying, Patrick, is you actually wanted this movie to be 3 hours because you've been against all these long movies, but now here you are saying you wanted a 3-hour movie. Maybe there's a director's cut. I don't get.
Sometimes you just don't get me. Sometimes you just don't. I was kind of hoping for 1:45 at this point. I'm like, what can we cut here? What can we cut here? What can we cut here? All right, let's. Sometimes less is more when it comes to these movies.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, folks, that will wrap up this discussion of the creator. Again, as Aaron said, if you've been listening to this, you've probably seen it. But if you haven't, take a shot. Catch it on VOD, I would say. Don't worry about the theater. It's visually amazing. And so it's definitely worth watching once just to see what Gareth Edwards can do from a visual standpoint. Other than that, make your own call. If you love AI after this, then you do you. That's fine. In the meantime, we'll just continue to move forward with our human discussions and human conversations, as we will next week. We're actually going to be tackling the latest John Carney movie. He is back, and he's got original songs, original stories, from his movie Flora and Son. It's debuting on, I think it's debuted already for, Apple
out.
TV Plus. Yes. So we'll be checking that out and talking about it next week. So be sure to tune in and join that with us. Join us with that, or however I do it grammatically. Anyway, that'll do it. Aaron, thanks for another good conversation. We'll talk soon.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. If you enjoy the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. These help increase visibility for the show and grow our community of listeners like you.
We also invite you to connect with us further by joining our ever-growing Facebook discussion group. A link to that is in the show notes, or you can just search on Facebook and find us that way.
If you'd like to continue the conversation with me, you can follow the show on Twitter @Feelin Film, or connect with me in the Facebook group. I'm very active in both places and would love to chat.
And if you want to connect with me, you can find me at Shoeless Patch on both Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to tag me in any comments so that I'll be notified and not miss you.
Once again, thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Until then, stay positive.
And keep feeling film.